I want you to close your eyes for a second. Think about the last few Saturdays you spent watching college football. But don't think about the big plays, not the touchdowns. I want you to think about the feeling in your gut,
The anxiety. Or maybe the confusion.
the fatigue, the absolute exhaustion of just trying to keep up. You turn on the TV, and the quarterback you spent 3 years cheering for, I mean, he's suddenly wearing a rival's jersey.
Yeah. That whiplash is real.
And you look at the conference standings, and Stanford is playing a conference game on the Atlantic coast. You hear about some 17-year-old kid getting a Lamborghini to sign with a school that, went 4-8 last year?
It felt for a long time like the sport was just coming apart at the seams, like the fabric was tearing.
Exactly. It felt like the engine was redlining, smoke was pouring out of the hood, and the people driving the car, the NCAA, were just, I don't know, arguing about what song to play on the radio.
That's a perfect analogy. We all knew something had to break.
We knew the math didn't work. We knew the whole amateur model was basically a zombie, just walking around pretending to be alive.
And now we know the price of the funeral.
$40 billion.
It's a number that, quite frankly, just stops you in your tracks. You have to read it twice.
It is staggering. And I want to be really clear right off the top here. We aren't talking about a rumor. We are not talking about some proposal floating around. We are talking about a signed deal, a deal that effectively ends the NCAA's control of football as we know it and hands the keys to the kingdom over to a corporate consortium. And this all starts in the 2031 season.
This is the single largest restructuring in the history of American athletics. I mean, you could make a case it's one of the largest in the history of global sports.
So here's our mission for today. We are going to go deep on this. We aren't just going to tell you who bought the sport. We need to explain how they bought it. We need to look at the legal mechanics, the financial plumbing, and the specific reasons why the NCAA basically had to die for college football to live.
And, we have to try and answer the question that I know is burning in every listener's mind. Is this the day the soul of the sport officially died, or is this the day it was actually finally saved?
Let's start with the check. $40 billion. When I first saw that headline, my first thought was, okay, who is it? Did Elon Musk get bored? Did Apple just decide to buy the SEC?
That's the natural assumption, right? We're so used to that eccentric billionaire model of sports ownership. But this is infinitely more complex, and frankly, I think it's more interesting. The buyer isn't a person, it's a consortium.
Consortium is usually just corporate speak for a bunch of rich entities who don't want to be named, but we actually have the breakdown on this one.
We do, and if you peel back the layers of the shell company, you see a three-legged stool. And this is really, really important to understand because it tells us exactly what their plan is for the sport.
Okay, so leg one, the most obvious one, I think.
The media partners, the major networks, your ESPNs, your Foxes.
Right. But wait, networks have always paid for rights. ESPN pays the SEC billions. Fox pays the Big Ten. How is this actually different?
It's fundamentally different because they aren't just leasing the rights anymore. They're not renters. They are taking equity.
Explain that distinction for me. Why does that matter to the guy, watching on his couch?
Well, think about it this way. If you're renting an apartment, you don't really care about fixing the roof. You don't care if the foundation cracks in 10 years. You just want a place to live this year.
Right.
That has been the relationship between TV networks and college football. They just wanted the ratings for this Saturday.
Yeah.
They burned through traditions. They broke up historic rivalries. They forced all this insane realignment just to get a better TV slot for, a 3-year contract?
They were strip mining the sport for short-term profit.
Exactly. But now they own the house. They have equity in the entire operational entity, and that changes the incentive structure completely. If you own the asset, you don't burn it down to hit a quarterly target. You need that asset to grow, to appreciate over 30 years.
So it's a paradox. The big corporate takeover might actually be the thing that stops the short-term corporate greed.
That's the hope. That is absolutely the theory behind it. Vertical integration, usually leads to more stability. But that's just the first leg of the stool. The second leg is where this deep dive gets really interesting and honestly a little bit dystopian.
Okay. You're talking about the infrastructure partners.
Yeah. Yes.
When I first read infrastructure, I assumed, construction companies.
Yeah.
People fixing the bleachers, painting the end zones, that kind of
Oh,
thing.
no. We are way past concrete and steel here.
Hmm?
We're talking about sovereign wealth funds and massive private equity firms that specialize in something called smart venues.
Smart venues. Okay, that just sounds like a marketing buzzword. What does it actually mean? Just better Wi-Fi in the stadium.
It means turning the stadium into a giant data capture device. But more specifically, it's about solving the war between the couch and the stadium. Right now, the experience of watching a game on your 80-inch 4K TV at home is, you can argue it's better. It's certainly cheaper, and it's way more comfortable than sitting on a metal bench in the rain. Attendance has been slipping, especially in the student sections. These infrastructure partners are coming in to solve that problem, but they're not solving it by adding cushions to the seats. They're solving it with latency.
Latency, as in the speed of data transmission.
Exactly. The sources we've seen, they heavily imply integrated data environments.
Yep.
So here's the vision. You're in the stadium, you have your phone, the game's happening right there in front of you. Because of the new 6G, maybe even 7G infrastructure they're going to install, you have zero latency. Your phone is as fast as the action on the field.
Right. And why does that matter?
Because it means you can bet on the outcome of the next play in real time. Will they run or pass? Will he make the field goal? Will he catch it? And the bet settles instantly. They are, in effect, turning the stadium into a 100,000-seat casino.
Wow, that removes a lot of the romance for me.
It monetizes the pauses in the game. College football has a lot of downtime. Timeouts, commercial breaks, play reviews. This new system fills all that downtime with microtransactions.
So the infrastructure investment is really just building the plumbing for in-game gambling.
In-game gambling, instant merchandise sales, targeted advertising based on your betting history. It's all about extracting the maximum possible value from every second that a fan is in that building.
It feels incredibly cold, but I guess it pays the bills. A $40 billion bill at that. What's the third leg?
Technology partners, but not tech in the way you might think, like Google or Apple. We are talking about enterprise fintech.
Financial technology. Why on earth does a sports league need a fintech partner?
To handle the payroll.
The payroll for the players.
Exactly. And to handle the compliance that goes with it. Look, the NCAA was trying to run a multi-billion-dollar economy using, spreadsheets and the honor system? It was a joke. This consortium is bringing in enterprise-grade compliance engines. Think about the scale of this. They need to track payments to thousands of athletes across 50 different states, manage tax withholdings, ensure the IRS is happy, and most importantly, enforce the salary cap.
So this isn't just about buying the rights to air the games on Saturday. They are buying the entire operational capacity to run a massive, incredibly complex corporation.
They're buying the plumbing, the wiring, and the foundation of the house. The NCAA is handing over the operational rights to all of FBS football, total control of the college football playoff. And this is the most crucial part, all compliance oversight.
That brings me to a really important question. You mentioned compliance.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. The NCAA's version of compliance was a joke. It was a rule book thick enough to stop a bullet, but with zero actual enforcement power. How is this new group going to be any different?
That is the absolute key to this entire $40 billion deal. And it leads us to the concept of legal insulation.
I saw that phrase in the reports, legal insulation. It sounds like something a lawyer would dream up. What does it mean in this context?
In the simplest terms, it means they are buying the ability to say no without immediately getting sued into oblivion.
Explain that. Because the NCAA got sued every single time they sneezed.
Because the NCAA, as one source put it, was a tent in a hurricane. Every time they tried to enforce a rule like you can't pay players or you can't transfer freely, the courts looked at them and said, that's an antitrust violation. You are a trade association illegally restricting the income of your workers.
And the NCAA would lose. Every single time.
Every time. It culminated in the Nina Supreme Court loss in the Alston case. That ruling was a massacre. Justice Kavanaugh basically wrote a concurrent opinion that said, and I'm paraphrasing, the NCAA is not above the law just because they play sports. Stop it.
Okay, so how does this consortium fix that fundamental legal problem? If they try to cap player salaries, won't they just get sued for antitrust violations too?
Not if they have a partner. And that partner is a union.
The U word. Finally.
This is the hidden mechanism. It's what all the sources are hinting at, and it's the only way the legal insulation actually works. It's called collective bargaining.
Okay, break that down for the non-lawyers listening. What is that?
Sure. Let's say all the restaurant owners in a city get together and say, we all agree not to pay any chef more than $20 an hour, That is illegal. That is classic price fixing. It's a felony.
Right, collusion.
However, if those same restaurant owners sit down at a table with a union that represents all the chefs and they negotiate a contract, and that contract says, okay, the maximum wage is $30 an hour, but in exchange, we also get guaranteed health care and a pension plan, that is a legally binding contract, and it is completely exempt from antitrust law.
So the entire $40 billion structure, the only reason it works is because they are finally officially going to make the players employees and have them unionized.
Correct. You cannot have stabilization, which is the main buzzword of this deal, without having control. And you cannot have control without a legally enforceable employment contract. The NCAA refused to cross that line because they were pathologically obsessed with the student-athlete myth. The consortium, they don't care about the myth. They care about stability and profit.
It's the ultimate paradox, isn't it? To save the sport as we know it, they have to kill the last vestiges of amateurism.
Which, I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. It was already dead. It was a ghost haunting the stadium.
That is a perfect segue. I want to do the autopsy now, because we can't really appreciate the solution without understanding how the murder happened. You mentioned the NCAA refusing to cross the line. But I've been reading these reports from Feinbaum, from Stephen A. Smith, and I get the sense the NCAA didn't just fail. They actively sabotaged their own position.
It wasn't just incompetence. It was a deep-seated arrogance, a belief that they were untouchable.
So let's look at what the sources identified as the three nails in the coffin. Nail number one, NIL.
Name, image, and likeness.
Now wait. I remember when NIL started just a few years ago. The public narrative was, let the quarterback sell some autographs, let the star receiver be in a local car commercial. It sounded fair. It sounded reasonable.
It was a fair concept. The idea itself was fine. The execution, however, was an absolute unmitigated disaster.
How so? What went wrong?
The NCAA fought it tooth and nail for so long that when the courts finally forced their hand and made them allow it, they had no plan. They had no framework. They had no rules. They effectively threw their hands up and said, fine, do whatever you want. We don't care.
They created a total power vacuum.
And nature, as we know, abhors a vacuum. And into that vacuum stepped the boosters. And we need to be clear, these aren't marketing executives looking for a return on investment. These are wealthy fans who are obsessed with winning football games. And they formed collectives.
I always love that term, collective. It sounds like some kind of, Soviet farming initiative from the 1930s. But in reality, it's a bunch of guys who own car dealerships and construction companies pooling their money to go out and buy a five-star linebacker.
That's an accurate description. The sources all call them de facto payrolls. But here's the specific reason it destroyed the sport's competitive balance. There were no contracts. There was transparency. A kid would get promised $1 million to go to school A. Then he gets to campus, and maybe the money isn't all there. Or maybe, mid-season, school B calls his agent and offers $1.5 million. There was nothing stopping him from leaving.
It was a Wild West, but the sheriff, the NCAA, was walking around with a water pistol.
And that chaos leads directly to nail number 2. The transfer portal.
Or, as Stephen A. Smith so elegantly calls it, free agency on steroids.
He's not wrong. But I actually want to push back on the free agency comparison because it's an insult to actual free agency.
Okay, how so?
In the NFL, free agency happens in March. That there's a specific window. You sign a multi-year contract. You are locked in. You are part of that team. In the NCAA, under the chaotic portal rules, players were effectively day-to-day employees with no contract. You had teams with roster turnover of 40, 50, sometimes 60% in a single year.
I cannot even begin to imagine being a coach in that environment. How do you build anything?
You can't. We saw great coaches quitting, legendary coaches, guys like Nick Saban effectively walking away and saying, this isn't the sport I signed up for anymore. You can't build a culture. You can't develop players if half the locker room is browsing Zillow looking for apartments near their next school during halftime.
And from a fan perspective,
yeah,
it's just hard to get invested. It's hard to buy a jersey when you know the guy wearing number 7 is going to be playing for your biggest rival in 3 months.
It completely destroys the connection between the fans and the players. And that, in the long run, devalues the product you're trying to sell.
And nail number 3. We touched on it, but we really need to hammer this point home. The courts.
The endless legal defeats.
Stephen A. Smith had a brutal, but I think accurate take on this. He said the NCAA was just getting punked in court.
Exposed was the word he used. And that's right. The NCAA's entire authority rested on an illusion. It rested on the idea that people would just listen to them because, Well, because they were the NCAA. It was an appeal to an authority they no longer had.
The old respect my authority argument.
Exactly. But once the lawyers, and more importantly the judges, realized the NCAA had no legitimate legal standing to restrict employee earnings, the floodgates just burst open. The NCAA was paralyzed, they were bleeding cash and legal fees. They reached a point where if they tried to enforce a rule, they got sued and lost. If they didn't enforce a rule, the sport just descended further into chaos.
Rock meet hard place.
And that is precisely why they sold. They looked at the chessboard, realized they had no moves left, and they chose the lucrative exit. They took the $40 billion rather than fighting another 10 years of losing battles in court.
It's the ultimate take the money and run. But, okay, they took the money. The NCAA is effectively out of the big-time football business starting in 2031. Now we have this consortium. What actually changes on the ground? Because if I'm a fan, I'm hearing corporate takeover, and I'm terrified. But the sources, they all keep using this one word, stabilization.
That is the buzzword of the entire deal. Stabilization.
It sounds really boring.
Boring is expensive, and right now, boring is absolutely necessary. The goal of this takeover isn't a revolution, it's a correction. They aren't trying to change the game of football itself, they're trying to fix the broken infrastructure all around it.
So let's get into the specifics, the pillars of this new system. What is Pillar 1?
Unified NIL compliance.
Finally, some sanity.
This is the big one. They're completely replacing the booster-driven collectives. No more shady deals in the back of a state house, no more cash in a bag. They are creating a centralized, transparent infrastructure for all player payments.
So it moves from under the table to on the payroll.
Correct. It shifts the entire ecosystem from the Wild West to a regulated professional system. Players will get paid, and in many cases, likely more than they are getting now, but it will all be through a unified mechanism that can be tracked and audited.
Does this mean a salary cap? Is that on the table?
It almost certainly means a salary cap. The sources don't give a specific number yet, but the phrase fiscal guardrails is used over and over. That implies a cap. And that, theoretically, levels the playing field. Right now, a Texas or an Ohio State can just outspend everyone infinitely. A cap enforced by this powerful central authority actually gives the smaller schools, the Oregon States, and the Wake Forests, a fighting chance to compete.
That sounds professional.
It is professional. It's admitting what we've all known for 20 years. These are employees.
Okay, Pillar 2. This is the one that really caught my eye because Kirk Herbstreit was so vocal about it. Transfer reform.
The guardrails, as he calls them. Herbstreit has been arguing for something like this for years now.
But hold on, didn't you just say the courts stopped the NCAA from restricting transfers? How can this new group get away with it?
Remember the U word.
The union. Collective bargaining.
Exactly. If the players' union agrees to certain transfer restrictions in exchange for other benefits, like guaranteed contracts or post-career health care, it becomes legally sound.
So we might see a system where a player signs, say, a 2-year deal when they come out of high school.
Yes. Or a system where you have specific transfer windows, just like in European soccer. Or maybe a system where if you transfer, there's a financial penalty or a waiting period that has been collectively bargained for and agreed to.
So no more guys transferring 3 times in 3 years.
Unlikely. They're desperate to reduce what they call annual roster churn. Herbstreit's point is vital here, and he speaks for a lot of fans. You can't recognize your own teams anymore. Coaches can't develop players. This reform is about protecting the core product.
It makes sense. Stability builds brands, it builds fan loyalty. And Pillar 3.
Centralized authority. For the very first time, a single authority has the resources, the legal standing, and the power to enforce the rules of the sport consistently across the board.
So goodbye to the patchwork of conference commissioners all fighting each other for scraps.
Exactly. Right now, the SEC commissioner's job is to beat the Big Ten commissioner. They are incentivized to cannibalize each other, to poach each other's teams. This unifies the entire command structure. It's a single boardroom making decisions for the good of the entire enterprise, not just one conference.
That sounds incredibly efficient. But it also sounds a little cold.
It is efficient, and efficiency can feel cold. But the alternative was the intense heat of a raging dumpster fire.
That's a fair point. Okay, now I want to pivot to what I'm calling the Don't Panic segment of our deep dive. Because when people hear corporate takeover, they imagine the field turning blue or the football being covered in advertisements.
Or robots refereeing the games, which, might not be the worst idea.
Let's not go there. So, based on the deal, what stays the same? What is locked in and protected?
A lot of the things that actually matter to the viewer on a Saturday are staying exactly as they are. First and foremost, the on-field product. The rules of the game itself aren't changing.
Touchdowns are still worth 6 points, thank goodness.
Touchdowns are still 6 points. But more importantly, the college football playoff format remains intact. The selection committee, for better or for worse, stays in place.
So we still get to spend all of November arguing about who got snubbed on Selection Sunday.
Absolutely. That argument is a key driver of fan engagement. The new owners are smart enough not to kill that golden goose. Also, the bowls. All the bowl games continue as scheduled.
Oh, thank goodness. I really need my random Tuesday night bowl game in December between a MAC team and a Sun Belt team. It's part of my holiday tradition.
We all do. And significantly, the basic scholarship and academic eligibility rules are slated to remain unchanged for the foreseeable future.
So the student athlete, even if they're now an employee getting paid, is still technically a student.
Yes, that academic tether remains, at least on paper for now. And this is a really important insight from the expert analysis in the source material. The consortium knows that the value of college football is in its tradition and its pageantry. They aren't trying to turn it into the NFL. The NFL already exists, and it's perfect at being the NFL.
Right. If you make an NFL junior, people will just watch the actual NFL.
Exactly. They are trying to save the structure that supports the game so that the traditions can survive. They aren't buying this thing to strip it for parts. They are buying it to reinforce the foundation before the whole house collapses.
But, and here is where we get into the really heavy stuff. Section 5. The culture war. Soul versus structure.
This is the emotional heart of the entire story.
Pat McAfee had a really interesting take on this. He acknowledged the fear that fans have. He said, people hear corporations and they immediately think the soul is gone. And he's right. College football is regional. It's messy. It's illogical. That chaos is part of its charm.
It is. We love the pageantry, the pettiness, the completely irrational rivalries that go back 100 years. And there's legitimate fear that a corporate boardroom in New York or Silicon Valley just doesn't understand why Auburn hates Alabama with the fire of 1,000 suns.
Exactly. Can you quantify that kind of generational hatred on a spreadsheet? I don't think so.
You can try, but you will fail. However, both McAfee and Paul Feinbaum landed on a synthesis that I think is really profound. They argue that the soul of the sport was already being sold.
In smaller, uglier ways. That was the quote that stuck with me.
Yes. It was being sold to the highest bidding booster with the newest car. It was being sold in secret handshake deals. It was being sold every time a conference realigned in a way that made no geographic or cultural sense. McAfee's point is that now at least the transaction is out in the open. We aren't pretending anymore.
It's the difference between a shady back alley deal and a signed contract on a big mahogany desk.
Precisely. And if we look at the fan reactions, we've been tracking the social media polls here, it is deeply, deeply divided.
Oh, it's a war zone out there in the comments. The critics are all saying, college football just became a boardroom product. This kills tradition forever. And I feel that. I really do understand that fear.
But then you have the pragmatists, the fans who have been exhausted by the chaos, and they're saying, look, if this means transfers get limited and my team's roster stays the same for more than 5 minutes, I'm in. The NCAA already lost control anyway.
It's that fundamental tension between efficiency, which is what corporations do very well, and passion, which is what fans want from their sport.
And that leads us to the deep question of this entire deep dive, the one we might not be able to answer for a decade. Can you have corporatized stability without accidentally losing the regional passion that makes the whole thing valuable in the first place?
That is the $40 billion question right there.
It is. Because corporations, by their nature, they tend to smooth out the rough edges. They like uniformity. They like predictable products. But college football is defined by its weird rough edges. It's defined by the unique traditions in every school. If this new governance group tries to sanitize the sport, to make it too clean, too predictable, they might save the business model, but kill the product that people fell in love with.
It's such a delicate balance. You want the plumbing in the house to work, but you don't want to tear down the historic, beautiful house just to fix the pipes.
That is the perfect analogy for this whole situation.
Now, speaking of tearing things down and rebuilding, let's talk about realignment, because this is where I think the listeners are going to be most surprised. This part of the deal really caught me off guard.
This is the big curveball in the whole deal.
Usually when we talk about the future of college football, we play the guessing game. Who is going to the SEC next? Is the Big Ten going to take UNC and Virginia? Is the ACC going to completely implode?
Right. The endless game of musical chairs. It has been the dominant and most exhausting conversation for a decade.
But the source material for this deal drops a huge hint. It talks about conference stability standards being a central pillar of this new system.
Yes, and this one detail changes the entire calculus of college sports.
So let's play the inverted guessing game. I want to ask you, based on the new incentives of this consortium, what happens to realignment? Does Florida State finally get its wish and leave the ACC? Does Notre Dame finally join a conference for football?
If you follow the money, if you follow the logic of this new structure, the answer is nobody moves.
Nobody moves at all.
Nobody moves. The great realignment is over.
Wait, explain that to me. The last 10 years have taught us that constant movement is inevitable because the TV money demands it.
Short-term TV money demanded it. Desperation drove realignment. Schools were jumping onto different lifeboats because they were terrified of being left behind by the TV networks who were writing the checks. But remember, leg one of our stool.
The media partners now have equity. They are owners.
The TV networks are the consortium. They own the whole thing now. They're not just buying one conference's rights.
Oh, that is a massive light bulb moment. I didn't connect those two dots.
Think it through. Why did Fox want USC and UCLA in the Big Ten? To get the Los Angeles market for their specific Big Ten television contract. But if the media consortium now owns the broadcast rights to every conference...
They don't need to move the pieces around the board anymore. They just bought the whole board.
Exactly. Moving Oklahoma to the SEC or USC to the Big Ten was about capturing value for specific individual contracts. But if you own the entire inventory, the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, the Big 12... all that realignment is actually inefficient.
It's inefficient. How?
It destroys long-term value. It kills the regional rivalries that have been proven to drive ratings for a century. It dramatically increases travel costs for all the sports. It confuses the fan base. If you own the whole grocery store, you want the products on the shelves where customers have always expected them to be. You don't start putting the milk in the cereal aisle.
So the era of regional identity fracturing, of destroying 100 years of tradition for a few extra dollars, that might actually be over.
That is the expert analysis coming out of this. The guess for the future is a freeze. The chaotic game of musical chairs stops because the music has stopped, and the new DJ wants everyone to sit down and just watch the show.
That is actually the most reassuring thing I've heard about this deal.
Yeah.
But it's also a little bit terrifying. It means that the Super League we were all so afraid of.
It's technically here, this is the Super League, but it's cleverly disguised as the current conference structure, just locked down by impenetrable corporate contracts. We get to keep the names, the ACC, the Big 12, the SEC, but they are all now just divisions operating under one corporate roof.
So we get the structure and benefits of a Super League, the stability, the uniform rules, the centralized power. But we get to keep the illusion, the mask of the conferences that we all know and love.
That is the bet they're making. And honestly, it might be the only way to save the regional rivalries. If you stop the poaching, you save the hate.
If you stop the poaching, you save the hate. I want that on a t-shirt. That is surprisingly profound.
It's the truth. Hate is the most valuable currency in college football. And you can't hate someone effectively if you don't play them every single year. This structure brings that back.
So we're looking at 2031. That's the timeline. We have about 5 or 6 more seasons of the current chaos before this new world order kicks in.
The transition period really starts now, though. The planning is underway. The legal structures are being built as we speak.
Okay, let's try to frame the big picture takeaway here. This entire shift, it seems to define the future of college football by valuing continuity over expansion.
Yes, that's the perfect way to put it. For the last 20 years, the only buzzword was expansion. Expand the conference footprint, expand the TV revenue, expand the playoff. The next 20 years will be defined by continuity. Keep the fans you already have. Keep the star players on your roster for more than 1 year. Keep the teams in their traditional conferences.
It's a massive pivot from a growth-at-all-costs startup mentality to a sustainability model.
Which is exactly what a mature business does. And make no mistake, as of this deal, college football is officially a mature business.
A $40 billion mature business.
Correct.
So as we wrap this up, let's try to summarize everything for the listener who was probably still trying to digest all of this.
The recap is this. 2031 is the year. $40 billion is the price. A powerful corporate consortium takes the keys from a powerless NCAA. The trade-off is crystal clear. We get rules, we get transfer limits, we get order and stability. In exchange, we finally and officially lose the illusion of amateurism, which, let's be honest, was already long gone.
We are trading a chaotic, hypocritical, and broken amateur model for a streamlined corporate and professional model.
That is the trade, for better or for worse.
And it leaves us with one final thought, a provocative question for everyone listening to mull over as they watch the games this Saturday in this old, messy system.
The question isn't whether change is coming. It's already here. The ink is dry on the deal.
The real question, the one we won't know the answer to until 2031 and beyond, is this. Can a corporation restore order without stripping the sport of the chaotic, passionate soul that made us all love it in the first place?
That is the gamble. That's the whole ballgame.
We'll find out in the fall of 2031. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
Play that.